What's happening, my fellow geeks and geekettes? Welcome to a brand new episode of Chris's Custom Collectibles, and today we are actually going to be revisiting an old custom collectible. This one is a golden oldie. This is one of my most popular... Put my phone on silent. Thanks, Luke. We're going to be revisiting a custom collectible. That's right, we are going to be repimping out the Jakks Pacific Ben Affleck Batman figure from Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. This, in my opinion, was one of my most favorite custom collectibles to do. I actually ended up selling a few more after that and pimping out a few more for private buyers after I released the video, and I just really enjoyed working on him, and I always had it in the back of my head that I wanted to revisit this figure with a few new techniques. Now, you guys are probably looking at that guy in the background. There is a video coming on that and the construction from start to finish and the end result. So I actually am waiting on the trench coat, and the eyes are being custom made, something I'm really proud of. It is just a bust from there up. The base itself is going to be quite gnarly and also functional, so I'm very excited to show you guys the end result. But back to the task at hand. So the main difference with this figure is going to be the body. And for that, we're actually going to be using some spare textured fabric that I had lying around from the Red Hood suit. As you guys remember, the Red Hood cosplay was sleeveless, and I ended up cutting the sleeves off, so I have some spare fabric as well as a pair of leg fabric as well from the leg portion of the suit. So the idea is to glue this fabric down to the body and then do all the highlights with the muscles and the muscle shading just to really bring this figure to life, as opposed to the shoe polish technique, which there is nothing wrong with. It's a sound method. Now, we are also going to be taking a mold of the chest emblem. Because we're going to be covering this up, we are going to be covering up the chest emblem, but once the mold has been taken, I am going to ground down the chest emblem so it is smooth and flush with the rest of the body. We are then going to make a resin casting of the chest emblem and glue it onto the fabric once the fabric has been laid down. Apart from that, we are really going to go to town on detailing the mouth plate, because I have a lot more confidence with doing skin detail and 5 o'clock shadow, most notably that guy. And of course, the cape is going to be a nice pleather cape with weathering at the base of the cape itself. And of course, the usual housekeeping bits, just repainting the gold knuckles, the fins, the gold toe caps with a nice sort of bronze color. Now, the first step is we have to get rid of this disgusting cape that just sends my blood cold. Once that's done, I've got to assess the situation in terms of taking him apart and how I can strategically glue this fabric down. So what I'm thinking is I'll unscrew the back of him, take the arms off and apply the fabric on the arms first. Then I can go to town with the whole body. So obviously, because this is the larger version, the smaller version actually has separated legs that can move, but this guy is all one solid piece in this section of the figure. So it's going to make gluing a lot more easier, but I do also have to go in and add some builder's bog into the body here where the groove of the belt sits. Otherwise, if we don't fill in that area, the fabric is just going to concave right in and it's just going to look weird. And the purpose also of doing this fabric method is we can have the belt riding a lot lower so he's not bloody Harry High Pants. So yes, like I said, we're going to remove the cape, assess the situation, take the arms off. I still have to do some tests just to make sure the glue I'm using is going to work and hold the fabric down, because this is polypropylene and it is a nightmare. All right, geeks and geekettes, it's good to be back in the saddle. It's good to be creating again. So with that being said, let's get to it. Okay, so seeing as though we're going to be covering up the whole body apart from the gauntlets, the boots, and obviously the cowl with that specialty fabric, I had to take a mold of the chest emblem, and that was just using some thickened up Pinky Seal silicone and some Pinky Seal putty. Now, as you can see here, there are 3 generations of this simple little mold. Case in point, this one here had a lot of air bubbles. This one here had a lot of surface bubbles that actually showed through on this test casting here. This is polyurethane resin, and that is what we're going to be using for the final emblem. So this right here is the final mold that we will be using. It is practically seamless apart from a few air bubbles in the areas that we don't even need to cast. So now that that's out of the way, and we can worry about that later once all the fabric is glued down, is the belt. So I've removed the belt from the notches here, and we will be filling in this area with builder's bog very shortly. But I actually isolated some certain parts of the belt because we're going to make a block mold from these pieces using Pinky Seal silicone silicone. Now I'm going to be gluing this down to a board and making some walls around it, pour some silicone in, and then I can individually cast these pieces to make a brand new belt, a lot more streamlined and a lot more neater, and mount them onto some black vinyl. Now once we take a mold of this, I'm going to go in and sand back the chest emblem so it is flat and flush against the chest itself, because we do not want this poking out over the fabric. We just want a nice blank canvas essentially when we go to glue the fabric down. So I will probably glue the fabric down to the arms first, which means unscrewing the back of him and removing the arms individually and then taking the gauntlets off. Still tinkering with what glue I want to use, if it's going to be a contact adhesive or just that cheap and nasty super glue from Bunnings. But so far we're on track, really excited about this project, and I'm really happy that I've decided to revisit him. Alright Geeks and Geekettes, now that I've taken Mr. Batfleck apart, it is time to start filling in some areas with Builder's Bog, most notably the section here, the groove where the belt used to sit, because we do want the belt riding a lot lower, like I said, so he's not Mr. Harry High Pants. So that's pretty easy done. The more trickier part is when we're going to be shaving down the chest emblem itself. Now, if you look on the inside, there is an indent. So if we were to just leave this as is and attack the surface here with a sander, it would leave a big bat-shaped gaping hole on his chest. So what we're going to do is go in with some Builder's Bog from the back first, and then we can go in and start sanding. So when we do go through the plastic, it's going to hit that Builder's Bog, and we don't have to worry about patching up a big gaping hole that is just going to be very, very tricky to do. So the Builder's Bog we're going to be using is just Sally's Builder's Bog with the little catalyst hardener. So because it's a bit colder here today, we probably have a couple of minutes working time. So I'm going to do the back of the chest first, and then going to move on to filling in the belt groove. So hopefully once this section's done, I can demold that little block mold I made of the section of his utility belt. Alright Geeks and Geekettes, it is now time to start laying down the fabric over the suited body. Now, I've already done a test on the left arm, and I've got to say, I'm beyond happy with how it's turned out. A lot better than I had anticipated. My biggest concern, and probably everyone else's concern, is the scale of the fabric itself, the scale of the print, because this is a 1:1 scale print of the Batfleck fabric, and this is equated to, say, just over a 1/4 scale figure. So everyone's concern will be, will the fabric texture match up to the scale of the figure? And I don't know about you, but it looks fine to me. This is the purpose of custom collectibles. You know, you're taking stuff that you've got lying around. In this case, I had a lot of this fabric lying around. Now, for those who are wondering, this fabric is from Arkham Workshop / Napier's Design. Got it a few years ago, and they are offcuts from the Red Hood cosplay. It is a beautiful fabric. So, the first step is we have to take the gauntlet off the arm, and that is 3 screws at the back, pop off, the handle pop off as well. Now, if you see, slight difference here. I've actually ground off the plugging port that locks into the torso, and that is because these arms are going to be glued back on as opposed to screwed back in, and that's just the method I'm using for putting the fabric over the whole body itself. And the super glue we're going to be using to glue the fabric down is just the cheap Bunnings super glue. Really excited about this one, Geeks and Geekettes. Really happy with the progress so far, so let's get to gluing. Alright, now that the arms are done, it's time to lay the fabric over the entire torso and legs section. Now I am keeping this one whole piece, but I have gone along and drawn out where I want certain panels of the fabric to be glued down. So I'm going to start with the back, because when we move to the front, it's going to be overlapping onto the back, because obviously you're not going to see it. It is probably going to be a little bit untidy, but I am going to try my best, but just keep in mind that it will be covered up by a cape. Kind of nervous about this part because, you know, this is the centerpiece of the bat suit and I want to get it right, and I just don't want to stuff anything up, especially in terms of getting the definition of the abs and the chest. So here we go. The fabric portion of this custom collectible is over. I've never been so relieved. My fingertips are caked with glue. I have to take at them with some sandpaper and some thinners to get this stuff off. My eyes are burning from concentrating. Yeah, this has taken me 6 hours to do. I know it doesn't seem like it wouldn't take 6 hours to do, but symmetry was a massive thing. And the only gripe that I have about this glue down method was the last step here, one of the wraparounds on the right thigh here. But you know what, the screen used iron head suits do have all these bucklings here and there, so it's totally allowed. At this point, I'm just nitpicking. So that being said, I think I more than deserve the night off. Time to have some dinner. Okay, now that the fabric's all been glued down, it's time to move on to constructing the belt and also applying the chest emblem. So now I did forego recasting the cylinders because they were just too warped for my liking. So these are actually pieces of balsa doweling. So nice and easy to cut, easy to shape, and these are resin castings of the pouches and the buckle, and I just quickly mounted it onto a vinyl strap. So pretty straightforward. Of course, nothing has been painted yet. In terms of the gold, we're just going to be using a gold Model Masters. So the resin I actually used was black tinted Bee Queen from Barnes. The molds themselves were made from Pinky Seal, also from Barnes. So like I said, this was a block mold. This was a case of using thickened up Pinky Seal and Pinky Seal putty over the chest itself, demolded, and then poured in 3 slush cast layers of Bee Queen. And I just went in with a Dremel and did the scratches on the chest emblem, cleaned all up around the perimeter, and it's molded just like the chest. And I will add a bit of heat to this before I apply it, just to make sure it is gonna wrap around Affleck's chest perfectly. So as far as I'm concerned, the chest emblem is done, waiting to be glued down. I still have to add some Velcro to the ends here, because it is gonna be a Velcro closure for the belt, but for the time being, we're gonna paint the cylinders and the panels on the pouches and the buckle, and we're just gonna be using the cheap and nasty super glue to glue it to the strap. So I'm using the black acrylic wash to give the illusion of muscle shading. It's really tricky and proving really difficult, quite frankly, because there wasn't a lot of detail going on in terms of the muscle structure. It was very soft, whereas the actual suit, they're deep crevices of muscle. So doing under the pecs, even though this section is going to be covered by the chest emblem, and just trying to do some subtle abs, like the strongman look of Affleck's bat suit. It's going to be nothing really major, but once the belt's on, as you can see right there, it kind of fits the bill. Once the emblem's on, the cape's on, and everything else is weathered up, it'll definitely look the part. Alright, Geeks and Geekettes, the next step is to weather the gauntlets and the boots. Now, if you've watched the original custom collectible, it's pretty much the same process. We're going to be using some Duramax plastic primer, give it a light spray over all 4 pieces, the 2 gauntlets and the 2 boots. We're then going to brush on some talcum powder, because we want these looking dusty and dirty and kind of on par with the bodysuit fabric itself. So after that, I'm probably going to spray some Preserve-It on there. I also have to touch up the boot caps, the knuckles, and the fins with a gold from Model Masters, and probably dry brush the fins very lightly with a silver so they appear scuffed. Also probably going to go in and do some dry brushing in the recesses of the gauntlets and the boots, and also do some black acrylic washing just until I find that happy medium. So prepare for a weathering montage. So here is one completed gauntlet, and I very subtly went around parts of the glove and the hand wrap and dry brushed some gold on, much like Affleck's screen used gauntlets and gloves, and just got some sandpaper and went back in over the knuckles and scuffed it back just to dial it back a bit so they're not as pristine. Now it's time to repeat this step on the other gauntlet as well as the boots. Okay, it's time to permanently attach the arms. Yes, that's right, we are permanently attaching these and fixing them in place, because I did gut the upper lip of the connection point here, the arm. So for that, we're just going to be utilizing that good old cheap and nasty super glue all around this area here, the fabric and also the plastic. Line it up and slot it in place. Okay, so the second last step in this custom collectible is sprucing up the mouth plate on the head sculpt. So the first step is we're going to grab some hot pink pearl and highlight the lips, and probably just try and do the mouth slit with a little bit of brown shoe polish on a very fine brush. Now you guys probably remember this hot pearl pink from the Buzz Lightyear custom collectible. It's great for doing highlights on skin tones, mostly mouth areas and especially the lips. So after that phase is done, and I've done a little test on the side here, we're going to get a very fine Sharpie, a 0.2 Sharpie to be exact, and go in and do his traditional Batfleck stubble, his trademark. Once that's done and properly dried, I'm going to spray it with a matte sealer. I'm then going to get some Model Masters flat black and go over the entire cowl, because it is quite a bit of scuffing in certain areas, and also do the same for the neck piece that's on the actual figure behind me. Now if you guys are wondering, I actually did go in and gut the head, and the reason why I did this in terms of leaving the traditional plug there is because I want this to be able to pivot and kind of do what you want on it. So the head will be loose, where you can literally pop it off the neck piece. So, you know, you can have him looking down, tilting his head, looking down to the side, just so there's a bit of variety. Alrighty, the last step in this deluxe custom collectible is the piece de resistance of the suit, the cape. Now, this is some pleather I got from Spotlight. It was $13 a meter, so I got 2 meters, and that will be more than enough in terms of coverage for this figure. And that montage you saw just then was the stencil that goes around the perimeter of the cowl that I'm actually going to use to trace onto the pleather and then do the dimensions of how long the cape is from the points of the tab, the front of the cowl, and the back of the cowl down to the back of his boots. Pretty much the exact same method that I used in the previous video all those years ago. The exact same student acrylics. We're going to have probably a burnt umber and a raw sienna. So that is for weathering the base of the cape. It's going to be done by hand, and then I'm going to just be using the cheap and nasty super glue to glue this to the figure itself. Do the proper double fold pleats, make sure everything looks good, and then we can do the final reveal. I'm very excited about this one, Geeks and Geekettes. By far my most favorite custom collectible to date. Home stretch, let's do it. So thanks very much for watching, guys. As always, this guy is available for purchase in my Etsy store. Unfortunately, this is the only one that I will be doing. The labor on them is just way too intense to do a run of these, so this is going to be a one-of-a-kind piece. I'm beyond happy with the end result. The blood, sweat, no tears was definitely worth it. Glad I revisited this custom collectible because, like I said at the beginning of this video, it is by far my most favorite and enjoyable custom collectible today, and that's why I wanted to revisit it and do it a bit more justice. Pun intended. Guys, wherever you are in the world, have yourselves a cracker of a day. Hope you're well, hope you're happy, be merry, be silly, and until next time, geeks, please always remember, cosplayers do it best.